Violence is currently being planned right now, as we speak, against illegal immigrants. Yes, you heard me right. Right now, it's being planned. But it's in South Africa. Pay close attention to what I'm about to relate to you, for it's a cautionary tale of how our nation, much like our own, has literally been brought down to a level of utter destitution by wave upon wave of illegal immigrants. I'm sure that in the news and in the papers you've heard SB 1070 compared to apartheid, a government form of racism that was sanctioned in South Africa back as late as 1990. But have you ever stopped to wonder what became of South Africa in the time since then? Probably not. Most people scream out apartheid and move on to the next insult and generalization without even knowing of the land and the people which gave birth to the term. South Africa and its people are without a doubt better off today than they were under the white colonial government which used to rule with an iron fist and closed mind. Current-day South African government has cabinets made up of mostly Africans, with some whites and a mixture of other ethnicities. They refer to themselves as the Rainbow Coalition, indicative of their multicultural views and the achievement of equal rights for all. My point here is to illustrate to you that the government of South Africa has for the most part been run by Africans for almost the last 15 years. So when we talk about the illegal immigration problem that South Africa is facing, understand that their people's views concerning illegal immigration can in no way be considered racist, because the people coming into the country and the people living in the country are all the same color, or at least what we Americans would describe as being of the same race. I've been learning a lot about South Africa as I've studied the United States' own issues with illegal immigration, and the parallels are shocking. Take, for instance, both nations' close proximity to other countries that are much poorer than them. In America, the majority of our illegal immigrants stream in from the south. In South Africa, theirs come from the north. Like us, they too have an ineffective border patrol, although they have an excuse, whereas we do not. They simply cannot devote enough resources to handle their own nation's problems, and the high costs it would take to stop illegal border crossings. The United States is considered a first world nation with liberal work laws. In South Africa, even though we Americans would consider them to be a second-tier nation to the other third world nations on Africa's continent, they are considered as wealthy as we are. And if you think about our work laws, if you think our work laws are lax, well, you should read about South Africa's. Here's a quote. In the agricultural sector, organizers report that aliens are prepared to work for extremely low wages, and that, due to their vulnerability as a result of their illegal status, they are wary of embarking on industrial action. The union argues that this not only undermines their ability to fight for better wages and conditions, but also serves to depress wage levels of South African workers, and results in a decrease in employment opportunities for South Africans. And here's another often cited famous example from Cafe Zurich in Hillbrow, a city in South Africa. The owner dismissed 20 South African waiters and replaced them with Zarian workers, with 20 of them who worked without being paid a wage, simply surviving on tips. It's even been said that some of the workers will work for nothing more than a plate of food and a place to sleep at night. Another similarity between South Africa's illegal immigrants and ours is that both groups remit money out of country to their family members back home, thus helping to drain the local economy. Illegal immigration in South Africa wasn't always so bad. Back in 1989, they only had 1.2 million illegal immigrants. Then, in the year 2000, that jumped to 2 million, and now, in 2010, the number stands at 5 million, with illegal immigrants making up 10% of South Africa's 40 million population. In 2000, the unemployment rate stood at 34%. Today, it's gone up to 50%. Housing costs have increased, food costs have gone up, energy. Every sector of the South African economy now costs more, but wages have remained stagnant, or for some classes gone down. Much of the recent illegal immigration has come from the failed state of Zimbabwe, with roughly 3 million refugees fleeing in order to find employment due to the destruction of their native economy. It hasn't simply been cow herders, taxi drivers, or construction workers flooding into South Africa to look for jobs, but lawyers, doctors, engineers, and many educated people who are so desperate for work they will take any wage they can get. College-educated South Africans are now forced to compete with other educated foreigners willing to work for less, thus forcing them to work for subpar wages as well. With all of these foreign-born individuals pushing down wages, driving up the price of everything, congesting the streets, hurting the healthcare system of South Africa by contributing to the spread of AIDS, it was only a matter of time before the citizens of South Africa broke down under the weight. So in 2008, mobs of South Africans formed suddenly, without any organization, throughout the entire country, and began to hunt down and kill any foreigners they could find. The rioting and lawlessness was suppressed, but it took the military of South Africa to do so, oftentimes with the local police forces standing by watching as foreigners were beaten and hacked to death in front of them. To this date, only about 100 people have ever been arrested or prosecuted for the 80 or so known deaths that took place. After the rioting was finally quelled by the South African military, over 100,000 immigrants, legal and illegal, were displaced, with many of their homes and stores having been burnt to the ground and looted. With South Africa having been awarded the 2010 World Cup, their government took action immediately to calm the population, so as to show a more civilized face to the world that South Africa and its problems were under control, and that the wave of xenophobic attacks was a one-time freak event. Construction projects were awarded liberally, causing the hiring of almost 1 million South Africans, and cultural awareness programs sprung up all around the country, reminding residents that many of the foreigners who were taking refuge in South Africa had come from neighboring countries that under the apartheid regime sheltered many South Africans as they fled the oppression of the old government and racist laws. But with all that's happened, with all that's transpired, nothing has changed. South Africa and its people, from street sweepers to lawyers and doctors, are more bloodthirsty and desirous of carnage than ever before. Here's a quote. "They say they will come after the World Cup and they will kill us," said Ethel Muzna, 32, a mother of 4. "These people are serious, they are organized, and they know where we live. They say they won't do anything during the World Cup because of the foreign tourists, but afterwards the police will step aside and some of us will get killed." And another quote. "These threats are coming from many different people, neighbors, colleagues, taxi drivers, passerbyers, but also from nurses, social workers, and police officers. South Africa has done all it can to try and suppress and play off these murmurs of coming violence after the World Cup, and for the most part, it has succeeded. Right now, there are 44,000 police officers watching out over the planned events, and they will likely be in force for 2 weeks after the game ends, along with their nation's military units on an unofficial standby in case the attacks against foreigners should start up. Personally, I think we will absolutely see increased violence once the games end. Perhaps not in the first few days, but as time passes and the workers hired for the construction of the World Cup are let go, as the media spotlight draws away from South Africa and the curtain falls, then we will begin to see the blood spilled. People who say that illegal immigration is good for our nation, or those who say open borders is the human thing to do, should be pointed immediately to South Africa to show them humanity as it really is, when pushed beyond their breaking point for resources, jobs, and food, when overcome by millions of uninvited foreigners who do not share common culture with the inhabitants of the land. Good people will turn to bloodshed in order to restore the balance of things.